If you would love to incorporate some of these principles, simpler schedules, more predictable rhythms, even some space for your children to wonder and think, check out the Peaceful Press curriculum at thepeacefulpress.com. Restoration Home listeners get 10% off with code Restoration10. And our resources from the Peaceful Preschool, our very first resource for children just entering the preschool years, to our life-giving literature-based elementary resources, the Playful Pioneers, the Kind Kingdom, and the Precious People. These resources were designed to help encourage practical life skills in your children, to give your family time to wonder, to incorporate beautiful stories that give you an imagination for good. You can check out those resources at thepeacefulpress.com and save 10% with code Restoration10. This is Jennifer Pepito with the Restoration Home podcast. This is the show where we talk about the peaceful path to connected families and restored communities. Today on the show, I'm so excited to be chatting with John Payne. He's the author of my favorite book on parenting, Simplicity Parenting, and the person who's responsible for really helping families develop some rhythms that are very powerful for creating healthy, comforting boundaries for children while still having so much respect for children. Thank you for joining me today, Kim.
Gosh, it's a delight to be with you. Thank you for the invitation.
I'm thrilled for this opportunity. I have loved your books. You have so many wonderful, emotionally resilient tweens and teens, being at your best when your kids are at their worst, the soul of discipline. But simplicity parenting was very life changing for me. We were early on in a very strong, patriarchal parenting culture that had some. I don't think everything about it was bad, but there were some things that were out of balance. And then for a little while, we tried this super permissive parenting that I think created actually a lot of fear and discomfort in one of my children. And so when I found simplicity parenting, I was like, oh, here it is. It's this beautiful balance of being a prepared adult, of kind of paying attention to the atmosphere of your home and the environment and how that's contributing to behavior problems. Just so many beautiful ideas that put the responsibility not so much on children's behavior, but on what the environment of your home, how that is impacting their behavior. So I'd love for you to just kind of give an overview of how you came to some of these revelations.
Yeah, it's interesting, Jennifer, how life for us all takes us on these pathways that just end up in unexpected places. It happens to everyone, doesn't it? And for me, the pathway began when I was back actually as an undergrad student studying psychology, and I always add, and I'm okay now. I've recovered. And and I had a professor who was talking about what was then known as shell shock, and there was an emerging field of trauma studies, but the term PTSD wasn't known. Anyway, he was talking about this, and I was thinking, gosh, that's just like the kids I was looking after at night in the group home I worked in. So going to college during the day, working in the night, like so many of us did. And I asked him, I said, look, you're talking about combat veterans. They're nervous, they're jumpy, they're hyper vigilant, they're over controlling. But I'm thinking about the kids in my group home, and you're just naming their behavior. You're talking about combat veterans, I'm talking about kids. So it was a puzzle, and I stayed in contact with Dr. Taylor for years. He encouraged me to study this, so I did, and he encouraged me to volunteer in Southeast Asia at the time, very, very war torn back in the late 70s, early 80s to mid 80s. So I worked in various sites from Java, Jakarta, all the way through to the Thai Cambodian refugee camps at the time at the end of the Vietnam War. And there I saw it again: kids who are nervous, jumpy, hyper vigilant, very over controlling. And at nighttime, my colleagues and I would go around the camps just soothing children who are having such terrible night terrors. But that was the same back in the group home, same deal. And I thought, gosh, well, I can understand this with kids in a group home because they've come from very tough backgrounds, I understand it with kids in war zones. But when I moved to London in the UK to study this some more, set up my own little private practice, through the door came kids who were just looked so much like the kids that I had been helping, a small part of helping in Vietnam and Cambodia, and and it was just, Jennifer, it was a major puzzle. I thought, hang on, these are just regular kids. What's happening here? And the more I looked at it, the more I couldn't see war, but in their backgrounds, but I could see what I called the undeclared war on childhood, and it was a cumulative effect of under the radar, new normal, very ubiquitous, the overwhelm due to the pace of life that their nervous systems weren't able to cope with, and that was disturbing but revealing. And so that was the journey into why, like how one kind of just starts to unravel this a little bit, this sort of mystery. Why are these kids looking like wartime kids?
Yeah.
And it's become so normal now that we hardly notice it.
Yeah. It's really heartbreaking because you've been doing this research for long enough that you would think that schools would pick up on it and, make more time for nature during the school day or give children more time to play. And yet they haven't changed at all. They haven't added in any more motor skills activities. And so, for restoration home families, families who use the Peaceful Press curriculum, there's a lot of large motor skills built in, or quiet time built in, or we even build in some deep pressure limb massage or rolling, or some of these sort of more therapeutic activities even that can help regulate an overstimulated child. But I think one of the hardships sometimes with homeschooling is moms start out and they get afraid that they're going to fall behind the school kids, and so they start adding in all these extra classes and tutors and workbooks and programs, and their children end up being just as overstimulated. And what I'm trying to tell people is that the learning all balances out. Like if you have a 5-year-old who learns to read in a public school because they're doing that every day, often those children are reading at the same level as the child who maybe learned between 8 to 10 years old in a more calm and simple and paced, developmentally appropriate homeschool environment. But they kind of get scared when they see, oh, the kids are learning more earlier.
It's a little bit like a marathon metaphor. It's a slow start and a strong finish. If you jump out fast, you're going to end slow and exhausted. Your learning abilities are going to be exhausted. You don't have that love of learning because you've jumped out too fast. Before, neurologically, the kids were ready for it. There's a couple of things you just mentioned there. One is more the body based piece. More and more children I'm seeing need that, need to actually have more coming into their bodies, need to have those reflexes, those primitive reflexes integrated. That's wonderful to hear that. Also, learning via movement, learning the numbers, learning the letters via movement, by sculpture, we homeschooled our children for many, many years, and they would be sculpting, taking beeswax, modeling. I remember, looking out the window at my wife, stomping K, the shape of K, great big K for king in the snow outside our window, and then our children rolling in the footprints to make K, and they were surrounded in K-ness for so long. But the other piece to this uh, is to think about the love of learning in the sense that um, when we allow our children enough decompression time, when we allow them enough time for creative play, the learning centers in their brain, the organizational centers, the neocortex and the frontal lobes in particular, they then activate. the brainstem then sends messages to the frontal lobes, to the neocortex, that all is well. You, if you think of the brain, it's the ancient brain, the reptilian brain, which asks, "Am I safe?" Now, and only if I'm safe will I release information to my loving brain, the limbic system. And if I'm loved and I'm warm and I can give love, then I'll release now another myelinate another set of roads and pathways to the learning brain. So if a child is being forced to learn and being overwhelmed, then their "am I safe" brain says, "I don't know." I don't think so. And so the actual learning and memory, love of the learning, and then the remembering of the learning are actually perfect for homeschooling, because it's within our sphere of control to actually have that be just a very sensible, normal neural pathway. This is not something we're making up. There's just very, very solid evidence for this. And the other thing I would also add to that, Jennifer, is that um, if you look at the world our children are going into, in 2015, over 50% of all employment in the United States and Canada was self-employment, was part-time, gig-based, project-based self-employment. Now, by 2025, those figures have risen to above 70% of all employment. Now, if anyone has listening in today has ever been self-employed, or knows someone or a friend who's been self-employed, it takes grit, it takes determination, it takes innovation, it takes self-motivation. No one gets you up in the morning when you're self-employed. Now that is the world our children are going into. Adaptability, all these words, when you think about self-employment, where do kids learn that? They learn it through play. They learn it through creativity, and it's not just they're learning it; they're myelinating that part of their brain, and so parts of their brain. So when people say to me, simplifying kids' lives and balancing and stripping away all the extraneous stuff and giving basically children a childhood. That's so nice, Kim, but that was Little House on the Prairie. That's and I say, actually, on the contrary, that's the world our children are going into, because they will need to be motivated. They will need to have that grit, that determination. You watch a child building a tree house that keeps falling down. The amount of figuring, the amount of engineering brain, three-dimensional intelligence that's yet learned, and intrapersonal intelligence. I'm talking about Howard Gardner's multiple intelligence. The amount of learning, as well as the cognitive learning, that's involved in that is just beautiful to watch. I would posit that the kids stuck in rote learning, kids stuck in that kind of forced, high stakes, standardized testing world, are actually being educated for a world that is rapidly not existing anymore,
Yeah,
because it relies on outer structure.
I really appreciate what you're saying, because this is also my hunch. And, what we focus on in the Peaceful Press curriculum is a real balance of practical life skills. So we do things like make bread or build a teepee or build a tin can lantern, like simple engineering projects that give children some cause and effect and some motor skills, even, or some planning skills, along with a lot of reading, a lot of talking about the books, and a lot of imaginative play. Because this is what it does look like, is that the kinds of jobs where you just go into a factory line, those will be replaced by robots. And what we do need is people who can think creatively, think outside of the box, have a diverse skill set. And I don't think it's all about that anyhow. The other thing that I feel like, when you homeschool in a more like simplicity parenting, peaceful press way, what you're also giving your children is some mental space. My motto for myself and my family is earth's crammed with heaven, every common bush of fire with God, but only he who sees takes off his shoes. And I feel like the ideas are out there for our children, the good ideas, the beautiful ideas. But if our schedule is so full, they'll never have the chance to wonder or be curious or, be like Leonardo da Vinci, who was sitting there scribbling and came up with things that were early life-changing inventions.
Hmm. Yeah, the spaciousness, having children have that sort of spaciousness in their lives. I get it why we are nervous about that, because you look around at the kids' cousins and other kids in the neighborhood, and it's like we're trying to pack 18 years of development into the first 8. But what happens is that we then get a surge of anxiety and mental health issues, because that has a cumulative effect. Remember, I was saying I saw wartime kids when I came back to the West and I was studying trauma. I couldn't spot it, actually, Jennifer. I couldn't spot it. I thought, what is going on? Why are these kids looking? So I started visiting their homes, started looking into what was really going on. And what struck me is that it was cumulative in the simplicity parenting way of going about things. What we talk about is that every child has their little quirk, and it makes them so lovable, that little quirk, and kind of infuriating sometimes too. But that's their little quirk. Now, if you add cumulative stress to their life, under the radar, normalized stress, that little quirk becomes problematic, and it can even slide along a spectrum and become a disorder. But here's the piece that is just so uplifting. After all these years, I still feel so motivated by this. Is that if you add cumulative simplicity and balance and spaciousness to their life, that quirk becomes their gift. In fact, it even becomes their genius. So the quirk, if a child is a busy child, she's a busy girl. Well, a very stressful life means she starts to become agitated and overmotoric, moving too much. Keep adding stress, and you end up with an ADHD diagnosis. It's not that that's a false diagnosis sometimes, but it's an inflamed. I call it a soul fever. That's a fever of the soul. Now, if if we have a child and we know it's not them, we know, my goodness, this is not really who I know this child to be different. My daughter, my son, my child is different. And we start to dial it back. I can't tell you how many parents over the years have said to me, when we had the courage to dial it back, I feel like I've got my little girl back. I feel like I've got my child back. And not only do they get them back, that same child who was a busy girl, right? Now, because she's not in fight or flight, because the amygdala in the base of the brain is not signaling I need to survive, and she becomes frenetic. Now she can calm down. The parasympathetic nervous system starts to become beautifully activated, the calming, soothing parasympathetic nervous system. And now that same busy girl is now the motivated girl. She's the funnest kid, the funnerer, as the kids say. She's so funnerer, mum. That she's just out there coming up with all kinds of ideas, building. And now she's gone from being bossy to being fun. And now she has a bunch of friends. But not only that, now she's learning. Because academically, before, she had closed down, right? We're back to the brain. She'd closed down the neocortex, because no one is going to sit and learn language arts and math and number work if they don't feel bodily and emotionally safe, because life is moving too fast. It actually triggers that I am not safe response in their brain base.
Yeah. It's so good, and really all of the principles of simplicity parenting come at play there to solve that issue. If you have a child, if someone's listening, even if they have a child who's struggling, the principles are simplifying the environment, establishing rhythms, simplifying the schedule, and filtering out the adult world. And you could think of an example, a home where It's very messy and chaotic. The mom's on her phone all day. When the parents are together, they're fighting. The kids are getting packed in the car, all day long, in and out, without really a chance to even have like a healthy meal or a nap or a rest time. Those kinds of experiences all together will create a child who's melting down, who's struggling. But that's often just the normal life for people. Their schedule is so full that it creates conflict among parents, which creates even more stress and fear for the child. What are like some of the first steps? If a mom is listening to this and they're saying, "Oh wow, that actually describes my life right now." What would be a couple first steps to kind of simplify and quiet things down so that their child can settle back into joy and peace?
Yeah, one of the things that we've noticed with our coaches, and we have over 1,500 coaches around the world. We train group leaders for
Mhm,
their communities, and then coaches who work one to one. So we get a lot of cross cultural feedback from 1,500 people. There's a lot. They've been doing this for getting on 25 years now. So we get a lot of feedback from different cultures, but also different economic stratas as well. And so what we've done over the years is that we've watched the pathways of simplicity and balance, and the things that both are simple and doable to do. Small is beautiful, and that kind of doability. We've also noticed things that endure in 5, 6, 7 years. They're still there because they were natural to the family. There are basically, what we've noticed is these pathways. One is to have children live in an environment that's spacious and organized, even if it's a tiny little apartment in Brooklyn or whatever it is, doesn't matter. But is decluttering, because out there in the world it's really disorganized. We can't control it. As Stephen Covey in his book The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People noted, that a very effective, I'd say, mummy, daddy, uh, works within their sphere of control, not within their sphere of concern, presuming they can control it. So a very effective person says, well, look, what can I can control? What can I control here? I can only control my controllables, as I think about. Now, out there in the world, it's very disorganized at the moment, like, spectacularly. It's choppy, it's changeable. So in here, in our family, it's the only place we can truly control lovingly. And so having a decluttered house, but not just decluttering, but organized. So when children want their crafting materials, they know which basket that's in. They know, and so they're not they're feeling that, like, we can talk about a child feeling safe, but when they know which basket to go to, which drawer to go to for which implement, and they know, then that signals to them on a much deeper, more fundamental and true level that you are safe, sweetheart. You are safe here. Also, the avalanche of toys and books and clothes. Just establish libraries, and just seasonalize clothes, and all the ones that aren't of that season go out in boxes. All the books, just leave children with 3 or 4 or 5 books that they can dive deeply, deeply into. Same with toys. Half a dozen to a dozen toys is plenty. And when the children then want to change out their toys, they can then go to the library, to the boxes that you've got, and they can change them out. It's like old friends returning. So, what is rare is precious, rather than just this avalanche of Western culture of too much stuff. That's the first. The second that you mentioned already, Jennifer, is rhythm. Children who know what's coming next are children where the limbic system, remember, am I safe? Am I loved? Am I competent? 3 wraps of the brain. Children who know what's coming next are safe because they prepave. They know what's coming next, and they develop a picture of it. That's the limbic system. And that draws a child out of fight or flight into, I am safe. I am safe, and I am cared for and loved because my mummy said we were going to do this next, and look at that, we're doing it. And it means, and I am organized. My mummy is organized. So that's rhythm. I also add predictability into that, and being able to predict the next day, to preview, looking ahead. Um, Children that have rhythm and predictability become become very are very competent. They develop a sense of agency because they're doing the same thing in the same way every day. It's not boring routine, cold, boring, detaching routine. It's warm, loving, connecting rhythm. The two things are different. Now, kids with rhythm they know the drill, they know how to do it, and they develop a competency. Now, competent children have agency over their life. Agency is what heals anxiety. That's the next book I'm co authoring at the moment, called Fearless and Free Helping Anxious Children. There's a whole chapter on anxiety and how, particularly in relationship to agency, if our children know how to do something because they've done it 100 times before, they know just they know just how to get all the bathrooms set up. My daughter used to love to do that. She'd get all the bathrooms set up just right. And she just developed, and this is when she was 2.5, and she just developed the most amazing way of setting things out, and she loved it. She's 23 now and she still does the same thing. But there's that sense of agency healing anxiety. That's the second thing. The third thing is scheduling. Most of us, what we noticed is that when parents dial back on the expectations of society around them with too much scheduling and build in time for boredom and give their kids the gift of boredom, because out of boredom comes motivation and creativity. Again, that's the world kids are moving into. And then the fourth thing we notice, the fourth pathway, is that of dialing back the adult content, and by that I mean adult speech, of just saying too much in front of kids. There was a dad a little while ago who said something like, this was at a cookout, and this dad was with his friends, and a friend of his said something to words to, I think almost exactly these words, because the dad wrote to me saying, um, we've got to really wake up, because if we've got to really wake up to global warming. That's right, to global warming, because if we don't, if we don't wake up, we're going to be dead in the water. Now, this little boy couldn't sleep for several weeks because he equated sleep with drowning and being deaded, as he. So that unguarded speech in front of a child had that child have anxiety attacks for about 3 or 4 weeks, because their left brain, little kids who are 4 or 5 years old, are very literal. So we've got to be dead careful about what we say in front of kids. The other thing is the dopamine addiction possibilities of screens. Screens are really damaging our children's development, at their neural development. The jury is in on this. We all know it. And it's not that I'm anti screen only. I'm passionately pro connection. The average American kid, 12-year-old kid, is exposed to 9.25 hours of screens per day. All right, that's the Kaiser Family Foundation and the Common Sense Media study. Now, every hour they're spending on a screen means they're not spending that in nature. They're not spending that with full body movement, number one. They're not spending that with friends. They're friending, but they're not friends. They're not spending that with family. They're watching family sitcoms. But most of all, they're not developing their own North Star. They're getting caught up the toxic magnetic north of influences and toxic pop culture. So for me, it's not being anti screen, it's pro connection, to those four connections. And lastly, Jennifer, this is something you and I were talking about before we began recording, is the fifth pathway, and that came out in the second edition of the Simplicity Parenting book, was that of leadership and values. What we noticed is that when parents really were offering leadership and value-based leadership in their families, the kids were much, much more secure. And that's the theme of the Soul of Discipline book as well, is that when we offer leadership and we don't sort of go too far into what you were describing with this sort of parenting without boundaries, like Parenting Sans Frontier, we swung way back into that no boundary thing, or that too tight a discipline. But when we raise our kids simply with balance and we offer leadership, that means they know they're safe and secure. Because if we don't offer boundaries, think of boundaries as a fence. If we don't offer boundaries in our family, then it's not just we're keeping kids contained, they know that we're keeping scary stuff out, right? So now we're safe in our little home. All these things, the 5 things I just named, they're all things that we can control. Out there in the world, we can't. In here we can. So I mentioned the undeclared war on childhood, but we can, well, we can't do much about war in the world. I mean, you look at it and it's like, oh my goodness, so much anguish, so much hurt. But what we can do is declare peace in our homes. That we're in charge of. We can do that. And it's a beautiful thing to just chip away and just your question earlier, Jennifer, sorry for this long answer, but this is your fault because it was a great question. Um, is that, is that whatever of those 5 pathways, whichever one you think, oh goodness, yeah, I could declutter, or I could start to organize the spaces, or you know what, I could make life more rhythmical. I'm going to start there. Or no, we're not going to do that second travel team. That would be too much. So you dial back your schedule. Or, you know what, this screen creep, these screens have really got away from us. When we introduced an iPad, we thought we're going to curate this, but it's really getting out of control here. I'm going to go on to screenstrong.org, join with a whole bunch of other parents, and we're going to dial back this screen because we see that it's dopamine, pleasure, and reward addicting my child. It's whichever way, whatever strikes a chord is the place to begin.
Yeah, that's so encouraging because I think sometimes families try to do too much. They try to revamp everything all at once. And then they get into what you guys in Simplicity Parenting, so aptly titled The Shame Spiral, where, they try to make the uphill battle and then they end up giving up on all of it. And so for those families, I love this concept of just choose one small doable change to start with instead of trying to do everything, whether that's simplifying the schedule, whether it's finding more rhythm, decluttering. Summer's a great time, fall's a good time to do that. One more question. I know we're running out of time here. I think that a lot of parents are thinking, oh, if I don't do all this, my kids won't get into college. Or if I don't do all this, my kids won't have the discipline to have a career. If we don't have, if they're not in sports and, going after all these achievements in childhood, they won't have happy, successful adult lives. Can you speak to that for a minute as we close?
Yeah, it's just to review a little bit. The children that are going to have happy, successful lives are the ones that are self motivated, are the ones that can problem solve, and particularly the ones that are cooperative with people around them, that have inter and intrapersonal intelligence and develop that. Giving our children a childhood with simplicity and balance. Um, having been doing this for now over 30 years, you see these kids and they're living beautiful lives because what they've done is now they're mummies and daddies themselves, and they're giving their own kids balance and space, and they are absolutely in competitive colleges, and they are absolutely in successful careers, but they're not career hopping. They're not having crises. They're not starting off in a big fancy university and then dropping out, or they're not being forced into sports teams. 75% of kids for example, who start competitive sport, really heavily competitive sport, for the age of 12, they actually quit before the age of 16. And now, when a kid's 16, you really want them in sport, but they've burnt out. So kids that are raised in simplicity and balance have a much greater chance of not burning out, of just slowly walking their lives. My own daughter, this is a great little anecdote just to round off. She's studying medicine. She's so outwardly successful sort of kid, but recently her mirror on her car, she has this old car, it wouldn't open and close. So she pulled off the door, off the panel, and she tested out the motor. And she figured out it was the motherboard, because in homeschooling we took apart an old computer, and I showed her how it all worked with the circuits. So she resoldered the circuit. But she thought she'd play a trick. When you press the button to go up, the mirror went down. She just wanted to be funny, and she set it up that way, knowing she could undo it. So she did that in the afternoon. That morning, she'd been, at university studying. That she did after, and that evening she went off and played in her strings quartet. Do you see what I mean? This is a and gosh, we have had our challenges with all our kids. Like anything else. I'm not sort of, you know. Pretending I have a perfect kid, but that's what we want. We want a child who can fix their mirror, go off and play music, go and study, go and have really good friendships, and sleep well at
Yeah,
night.
yeah, an excellent anecdote, because that is so true, that we want children who are well-rounded, that they can have happy relationships and for sure be good at a sport or a music or a speech or whatever the kind of family vision is, but that there's some balance in their lives. Kim, this has been really encouraging. I'm excited for families to go to simplicityparenting.com and find out more about your books, about these beautiful steps for happier kids and better relationships. I am just so thankful for your work and for your wisdom. Thank you for joining today.
Oh, I'm so pleased to join you, Jennifer. All the very best to you and the community.